Hello, my name is Kyle Gleed. I'm part of the Cloud Foundation Technical Marketing team. And in this video, I'm going to provide an overview on how to upgrade to VMware Cloud Foundation 9.0. I'm going to begin my discussion by first looking at examples of how to upgrade from vSphere 8.x to VCF 9.0. When upgrading from vSphere 8.x, it's important to understand that you will need to upgrade your 8.x environment to vSphere 9.0. This includes both the vCenter server and the ESX host. In addition, you will need to make sure that you have transitioned to VLCM images. So if you're still using VLCM baselines, or what was formerly referred to as vSphere Update Manager or VUM, you will need to make that switch as part of the upgrade to vSphere 9.0. Also, you must have at least one vSphere distributed switch configured in your vSphere environment. It's good to note that there will be additional components that will be deployed in your vSphere cluster as part of your VCF 9.0 upgrade. So you want to make sure you have available capacity for these components. Some examples of the new components include the Fleet Manager, VCF Operations if you're not already using that, the VCF Operations Collector, as well as VCF Automation. Along with the upgrade prerequisites, there are some additional considerations you'll want to keep in mind. The steps to complete the upgrade will vary depending on the components that are deployed. More specifically, if you have Aria Suite LCM or Aria Operations deployed, it will affect the order in which you will perform the upgrade, and in my examples, you'll see this. Keep in mind that the cluster where the vCenter is running will become the default cluster in the VCF management domain. This will be the cluster where we will deploy the new components that I referred to earlier. Once you complete your VCF 9.0 upgrade, you will need to relicense the environment. There are a number of guardrails, as well as some limitations that you want to be aware of. Rather than trying to call them out here in these slides and in this presentation, I'll just point you to the documentation, where you can go to learn more information about supported storage configurations, minimum cluster sizing, coexistence with things like LACP and standalone hosts, as well as support for stretch clusters. I mentioned earlier that your upgrade path will vary depending upon the components you have deployed in your environment. More specifically, I'm referring to two components, the Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager and Aria Operations. If either of these components are deployed in your environment, you will begin your VCF 9.0 upgrade by first updating these components. The Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager will need to be updated to version 8.18 patch 2 or higher. In addition, your Aria Operations will need to be upgraded to VCF Operations 9.0. If you have additional Aria components deployed in your environment, such as Aria Automation or Aria Operations for Networks, those can be imported into the VCF 9 Fleet Manager after the upgrade, where they can then be upgraded. Do note that currently there is no upgrade path for Aria Logs. If you have Aria Logs deployed, after you do your upgrade, that instance will continue to run. You will then deploy a new instance of VCF Logs 9.0 and run them in parallel until such time as you can shut down the old Aria Logs instance and switch everything over to the new VCF Logs 9.0. Also, the VIDM appliance that's used for identity management in the Aria Suite and specifically for Aria Automation, that is replaced with the VIDB in VCF 9.0. Here again, following your upgrade, the VIDM will continue to run and you can continue to use it until such time as you can switch everything over to the new VIDB. There are a few notable limitations that you will want to be aware of as you prepare for your VCF 9.0 upgrade. If your vCenter server is registered with an instance of VMware NSX, you will not be able to upgrade it to VCF 9.0 at this time. Watch for this limitation to be removed in future updates. In addition, if your vCenter server is configured in Enhanced Link mode, you will need to remove it from the Enhanced Link mode prior to doing your upgrade. Also, we do not yet have support for upgrading environments that are VxRail managed. Watch for future announcements with regards to the upgrade path if you're a VxRail customer. I will now go over some examples of upgrading from vSphere 8.x to VCF 9.0. In this first example, we have a vSphere customer. This customer is not currently running the Aria Suite Lifecycle or Aria Operations. For this customer, the upgrade begins by first transitioning to VLCM images. Once they are using the LCM images, they can then go in and complete their vSphere upgrade. This is a two-step upgrade where they will first upgrade the vCenter server, then they will upgrade the ESX host in their vSphere clusters. Once the vSphere upgrade is completed, they will then download and deploy an instance of the new VCF 9 installer. Once the VCF 9 installer has been deployed, they will then download the VCF 9 binaries. At this point, they will connect to the VCF installer to orchestrate their VCF 9 upgrade. The VCF installer provides a wizard-driven UI that will prompt for the required information necessary to perform the upgrade. Once the information has been provided, it does a validation to ensure that the environment is ready to be upgraded. When you begin the upgrade, it first starts by converging the existing vCenter server into the VCF management domain. It will then deploy an instance of VMware NSX. It will then configure the SDDC Manager appliance. It will deploy an instance of the VCF Fleet Management appliance, along with an instance of the VCF Operations and a VCF Operations Collector. Optionally, it can also deploy an instance of VCF Automation. Note that if you choose not to deploy an instance of VCF Automation at this time, it can always be deployed later as a day 2 operation. Once the installer has completed the upgrade, you will need to relicense the environment for VCF 9. This is done using VCF Operations. This completes your upgrade, and you can now move on to any post-upgrade activities, such as deploying an instance of VCF logs, deploying an external identity broker appliance, configuring VCF SSO, enabling vCenter linking, or deploying other components such as VCF Operations for Networks or HCX. In this next example, I will show how to upgrade a vSphere 8.x environment with Aria Operations to VCF 9.0. So in this example, we have a vSphere environment with Aria Operations. What's notable about this environment is the Aria Operations is a standalone instance that is not being managed by the Aria Suite lifecycle. The upgrade path for this customer will first entail going in and upgrading Aria Operations to VCF Operations 9.0. Once you have upgraded your operations, you will then transition your vSphere clusters to VLCM images if they're not already using VLCM images. Once you have completed your transition to VLCM images, you will then proceed to upgrade your vSphere environment. Again, this is a two-step process where you'll upgrade your vCenter server. You'll then upgrade the hosts that make up your vSphere clusters. With both operations and vSphere running on 9.0, you're ready to move on with the upgrade. So we will deploy an instance of the VCF installer, where we'll then go in and download the VCF 9 binaries. At this point, we will switch over to the VCF installer and use the wizard-driven UI interface to prompt for the required information and perform the upgrade. In this situation, because we have an existing instance of Aria Operations that was upgraded to VCF Operations, the installer will converge both the vCenter server and the VCF Operations. After it has brought those environments in to the new VCF management domain, it will then deploy an instance of the Fleet Management appliance along with an instance of the Operations Collector. It will then configure the SDDC Manager. It will deploy NSX, and optionally, we can also deploy VCF Automation at this time. Again, if you choose not to deploy VCF Automation at this time, you can deploy it later as a day 2 operation. Once the upgrade is complete, you will need to relicense the environment for VCF 9, and then you are done with your upgrade. At this time, you can then move on to your post-upgrade activities, which include deploying VCF logs, deploying an external vSphere identity broker, configuring VCF SSO, enabling vCenter link mode, as well as deploying other components such as VCF Operations for Networks, HCX. In this example, I will show how to upgrade a vSphere 8.x environment that is running the Aria Suite lifecycle together with Aria Operations to VCF 9.0. The significance of this upgrade example is that we have an instance of the Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager deployed. And from that Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager, we have deployed an instance of Aria Operations. As such, when we upgrade this environment, we will begin by first updating the Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager. We'll need to make sure it's running version 8.18 patch 2 or above. Then we use the Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager to then upgrade our Aria operations to VCF operations 9.0. Note that when we do this, it will also deploy the new VCF 9 Fleet Management Appliance. Once we have completed the updates for the Aria Suite Lifecycle and Aria operations, we then upgrade our vSphere environment. We begin by transitioning to VLCM images and then upgrading our vCenter and vSphere host to version 9.0. Once we have completed the vSphere upgrade, we then deploy the VCF installer and download the VCF binaries. We then use the VCF installer to upgrade our environment to VCF 9.0. The VCF installer will converge the existing vCenter server and VCF operations instance into the VCF management domain. It will deploy an instance of the operations collector. It will deploy VMware NSX. It will configure the SDDC manager and optionally deploy VCF automation. Again, if you choose not to deploy VCF automation at this time, you can deploy it later using the fleet management appliance. Once the upgrade is complete, we will then relicense the environment for VCF 9, at which time the upgrade is done and we can move on to the post-upgrade activities to include deploying an instance of VCF logs, an external vSphere identity broker, configuring VCF SSO, enabling vCenter linking, deploying operations for networks, ACX, or other components. In this example, I will provide an overview on how to upgrade from VCF 5.x to VCF 9.0. In preparation for upgrading from VCF 5.x to VCF 9.0, you'll need to make sure that your VCF environment is running version 5.0 or above. We support both sequential upgrades, where you would go from, say, VCF 5.0 to 5.1 to 5.2, then to 9.0, as well as skip level upgrades, where you would go directly from, say, VCF 5.0 to VCF 9.0. In addition, prior to the VCF 9.0 upgrade, you will need to transition the clusters in your workload domains to VLCM images. PowerShell scripts are provided to help with this, and you can also automate this using the API. You will also need to upgrade the Aria operations instance if it's deployed in your environment to VCF operations 9.0. The upgrade path will vary depending on if you're using the Aria Suite Lifecycle appliance or if it's a standalone Aria operations instance. Also, you'll want to verify that you have available capacity in your VCF management domain for new components that will be deployed as part of the 9.0 upgrade. These new components include the Fleet Management Appliance, VCF Operations if it's not already deployed, a VCF Operations Collector, as well as VCF Automation. Some additional considerations to keep in mind: you will always want to start by upgrading your management domain first. As I alluded to, the upgrade path will vary depending upon the components that are deployed, and more specifically, we're referring to Aria Operations and Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager. You will need to relicense the environment after the upgrade. For more information on guardrails and constraints, please refer to the documentation. The documentation has information regarding supported storage topologies, minimum cluster sizing, coexistence with LACP, standalone host, as well as support for stretch clusters. One notable limitation when it comes to upgrading from VCF 5.x to VCF 9.0 is that we don't yet have an upgrade path for VxRail customers. If you're a VxRail customer, please stay tuned for future updates and guidance on how to upgrade to VCF 9.0. In this example, I will show how to upgrade a VCF 5.x environment that is not running the Aria Suite to VCF 9.0. So here, the significance of this example is that we are not running any of the Aria Suite components. As such, when we do the upgrade, we begin at the SDDC Manager by first downloading the VCF 9.0 update for the SDDC Manager. Once that bundle is downloaded, we then perform an update of the SDDC Manager to upgrade it to VCF 9.0. After the SDDC Manager has been upgraded, we can use it to download the additional update bundles that are needed to upgrade the rest of the stack. These include NSX, vCenter, and ESX. We then use the SDDC Manager to upgrade NSX, to upgrade vCenter, and to upgrade our ESX host. Following the upgrade, it's always good to remember to go in and update the vSAN disk version and the VDS switch version. Once we've completed the upgrade of the management domain using the SDDC Manager, We then switch to the vSphere client, where we will deploy an instance of VCF Operations 9.0, along with an instance of the VCF 9.0 Fleet Management Appliance. We will then log into the VCF Operations, where we will register the operations with the Fleet Manager, add VCF as an endpoint, and we will download additional binaries. These binaries will be used to deploy the operations collector, as well as deploy VCF Automation 9.0. At this point, you have completed your VCF 9.0 upgrade, so you will relicense the environment using VCF Operations. At this point, you can then move on to complete any post-upgrade activities, such as deploying VCF logs, deploying an external VIDB, configuring VCF SSO, enabling vCenter linking, or deploying other components such as VCF Operations for Networks, or HCX. In this example, I will show how to upgrade a VCF 5.x environment that is running with VCF Operations to VCF 9.0. The significance of this example is that we have a standalone instance of Aria Operations. We are not using the Aria Suite lifecycle. To upgrade this environment, we start at the Aria Operations by upgrading it to VCF Operations 9.0. Once we have upgraded our operations instance to 9.0, we then go in and download and deploy an instance of the VCF 9 Fleet Management Appliance. We will then log into operations and register it with the Fleet Management Appliance. With the Aria Operations instance upgraded to VCF Operations 9.0 and the Fleet Management Appliance deployed and registered, we're now ready to move on to upgrading the management domain. To do this, we download the SDDC Manager Update Bundle and update the SDDC Manager to version 9.0. Once we've updated the SDDC Manager, we can then download the additional update bundles for NSX, vCenter, and ESX, and then we use the SDDC Manager to upgrade NSX, upgrade vCenter, and upgrade our ESX host. Once we have completed the upgrade, again, it's always good to go into vSphere and to update the vSAN disk version as well as the VDS switch version. Once the management domain has been upgraded, we then switch back to VCF Operations, where we will update the VCF Operations certificate. And after we update the operations certificate, we then will download additional binaries and deploy the operations collector, as well as deploy VCF automation. Once this is done, we have completed our upgrade. We can then go in and relicense our environment with a VCF 9 license, and then move on to post-upgrade activities, such as deploying an instance of VCF logs, deploying an external VIDB instance, configuring VCF SSO, enabling vCenter linking, as well as deploying other components like operations for networks, HCX, etc. In this example, I will show how to upgrade a VCF 5.x environment that is running with the Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager and Aria Operations to VCF 9.0. In this example, we have an instance of the Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager running. As such, we begin the upgrade by first updating the Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager. We need to make sure it's running version 8.18 patch 2 or higher. We then use the Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager to upgrade our Aria Operations to VCF Operations 9.0. When we do this upgrade, it will also deploy the VCF 9 Fleet Management Appliance. We then move on to the SDDC Manager, where we will download the SDDC Manager Update Bundle and upgrade the SDDC Manager to version 9.0. We then log into the SDDC Manager to upload the additional update bundles for NSX, vCenter, and ESX, and we then perform the upgrades of NSX, vCenter, and our ESX clusters. Once we are done with this, we go into vSphere client to update our vSAN disk version and our VDS switch version. Once the management domain has been upgraded, we switch to VCF Operations, where we will replace our VCF Operations certificate. We will then download additional binaries, and then we will deploy an instance of the operations collector. Now, in this example, we also have an existing instance of Aria Automation, so we can go ahead and use the Fleet Management Appliance to import the Aria Automation instance and upgrade it to VCF Automation 9.0. At this point, the upgrade is now complete, so we can relicense the environment for VCF 9.0. This is done using VCF Operations. At this point, we can move on to post-upgrade activities, such as deploying an instance of VCF logs, deploying an external VIDB, configuring VCF SSO, enabling vCenter linking, or deploying other components such as operations for network or ACX. This completes my overview on how to upgrade to VCF 9.0. In this video, we saw examples on how to upgrade vSphere 8 environments to VCF 9.0, as well as how to upgrade VCF 5.x environments up to 9.0. Thank you very much.